To Zanarkand, a Final Fantasy X fan-made audiobook project. Chapter 8. The SS Liki. The SS Liki rocked gently with the rhythm of the waves. The wooden deck beneath Tidus's feet groaned as it settled into the motion. The salty air filled his lungs, thick and bracing, a scent he had known his whole life. The way the sunlight shimmered over the water was dazzling with its constant rippling and undulating over the rolling waves. Seabirds cried high above, their voices sharp against the steady hush of the ocean. The boat was a broad, flat vessel that Tidus could tell wasn't exactly designed for the roughest of waters, but it looked like it could probably handle a decent swell or two. It appeared to have just one small cabin that looked to be where the captain steered from, beside which was a recessed door leading downstairs into the body of the ship itself. Besides that, there was just a set of stairs leading to a platform over the wheelhouse to access some of the higher sections of the rigging. For the first time since he had been pulled into this world, since Sin had torn through his home and left him in a land that felt more like dream than reality, he wasn't drowning in fear. The vast open sea, the feeling of a boat beneath his feet, the way the horizon stretched endlessly before him. It was all just so familiar. It was safe. Zanarkand was an island city, and the ocean was a way of life there that affected almost everyone, whether it was being involved in the massive fishing industry or training out on the water as a blitzer. Feeling the rocking of the boat under his feet was the closest Tidus had felt to home in a few days, outside of kicking a blitzball to Waka on the beach. "All right, everyone, huddle up," Waka called, waving them over. He stood over by the portside edge of the boat, out of the way of a few passengers milling into downstairs quarters, clearly not all that interested in the sights and sounds of the ocean, and just wanting to rest for the journey. Waka's ever-present blitzball was tucked under one arm, his ginger hair glowing copper under the midday sun. The energy in his body language, the way he shifted from foot to foot, made it seem like he was about to rally his team before a big game. He probably felt that way too. Yuna approached first, her pale robes fluttering slightly as she stepped forward, the wind catching the delicate embroidery of her sleeves. Lulu followed, arms folded beneath her fur-lined sleeves, her dark eyes already narrowed in mild impatience. Her doll was mysteriously absent. Kimari remained a silent, unmoving wall at the edge of the group, the wind ruffling his blue fur. Tidus couldn't help but eye the glint of the halberd strapped to the feline's back, as if Kimari might take fancy in testing him again. Tidus stuffed his hands into his pockets of his shorts and sidled up with the rest of them, putting the thought out of his mind. Waka bounced his blitzball off the ground, glancing around him like he was putting a strategy together. Something about the sound of the blitzball hitting the wood pulled Tidus's attention, but before he could think on it, Waka spoke up. "Okay, so listen up. I talked to the captain, and he says we should be getting to Kilika around sunset, maybe before if the sun's on our side. Then we hit the inn, hang out for the night, and then on to the temple at first light." He pointed to Yuna like she was a field defender about to be given an important piece of coaching. "You do your thing there, bada bing, bada boom, we get back to the boat and board for Luca." Tidus blinked. "Oh, I didn't know there was a stop before Luca. What's Kilika, that it? What's it like?" Yuna turns to him, surprised. "You didn't know?" Guess not." Tidus scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Waka groaned, smacking his forehead. "Man, I can't believe I didn't tell ya." He let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Yeah, first stop is Kilika. Yuna's got to pray at the temple there before we go anywhere else. It's part of the pilgrimage." "Oh," Tidus said, glancing toward Yuna. "That's, important, right?" Yuna smiled, nodding. "Very." Waka grinned, spinning his blitzball in one hand. "It's kinda like Besaid. They big into their blitz there too, yeah? So there's a big rivalry between our teams. Rivalry implies a challenge, Lulu cut in, but Waka either didn't hear her or chose to ignore her as he barreled on. And hey, we'll be praying for the Aurochs too at the temple, so you better come along, yeah? Lulu let out a slow, measured breath through her nose, her crimson eyes glinting. Some plan, she muttered, her voice as dry as old parchment. Waka just grinned at her like she'd agreed with him instead of mocking him. Exactly! It can't hurt, he said, flashing her a thumbs up. Titus watched them, something about the interaction catching his attention. Lulu, all black and quiet scorn, her arms crossed tight and a sharp gaze like she could cut through anything with a single look. And then there was Waka, warm and grinning, completely unaffected. Either he was too used to her to care, or he was just blissfully unaware that she thought most of what he said was nonsense. Lulu sighed, shifting her weight. We'll be at Kilika before nightfall, she reminded them all, seemingly bringing the huddle to a close for Waka. It won't be a long trip. Una nodded with a slight smile. I might lie down for a bit, but first I'm going to watch the water a little, she said with a hint of hesitation, as if she wanted to add something to the end of that sentence before she simply turned away and headed in the direction of the prow of the ship. Kumari's eyes never left her once as she walked away from them. Titus hesitated. Something about the way Una had said it, I'm going to watch the water a little, made him want to follow, to talk to her, to figure out what it was he kept catching in the corner of her expression. That soft weight behind her smile. But no sooner had she stepped toward the railing than a handful of passengers moved in, their voices low but urgent, reverent even. Lady Summoner! Una, please, just a moment of your time. She's Lord Braska's daughter, isn't she? A real high-born summoner. Must be fate, us meeting her like this. That one caught his ear. Highborn? Titus narrowed his eyes slightly, watching the small crowd form, faces lit up like they were in the presence of royalty. Una smiled, gentle, patient, like she'd done it 100 times before, and turned to speak with them, her hands folded politely in front of her, listening with the full attention of someone used to hearing the world's problems. Braska, Titus thought. The name sounded important, familiar even, but he didn't have time to dwell on it. Waka clapped his hands together, loud and sharp. All right, I'm gonna go find the guys, go over some blitz strategy. He tossed his blitz ball in the air and caught it with a grin, already falling into coach mode. Then he pointed straight at Titus, jabbing the air. You! Titus blinked. Me? Waka jerked his thumb over his shoulder. With me! Titus shrugged and followed Waka away from Lulu and Kimari as he thumped down the creaking stairs into the bowels of the SS Liki. Every step lower strengthened the smell of damp wood. Titus had to duck low under a beam, already hearing the murmur of voices below, the scrape of movement, the rustle of cloth hammocks. Down below was a large area with bright wallpaper, potted plants, and a number of doors leading into various rooms. It was actually surprisingly nice and pleasant. One said, engine room. Titus spotted Gata chatting with a man with ginger hair and an enormous backpack, although it looked more like Gata was being talked at rather than talked to. Waka casually pushed open an unmarked door and then released the sound of the joking and banter of the Besaid Aurochs, now audible from anywhere below deck. Waka's voice rang out ahead of him, loud and casual. Hey, Dato, what did I tell ya, huh? I'd take the bunk. Go, grab a hammock. There was a muffled groan from the far side of the room. As he followed Waka inside, Titus could see Dato sprawled out full length in a sagging cot, one arm draped across his eyes. "Aw, come on, Cap." He swung his legs off with the exaggerated sigh, but Waka was already laughing, waving him back down. Nah, you're good there, brother. Just kidding around. The room was little more than a storage hold converted into sleeping quarters. Nets stretched between beams, hammocks swinging with the roll of the ship, a few crates shoved into corners, doubling as tables or footrests. The Aurochs had clearly claimed this space. Their gear was everywhere. Botta sat on an overturned bucket, fiddling with a length of twine. Letty was leaned back against the wall, half asleep, and Keepa was kicking a softball against the far wall in a slow rhythm, just to kill time. Titus lingered near the doorway, watching the way Waka moved among them, commanding, yeah, but not barking orders. He laughed with them, ruffled Jasu's hair as he passed, stole a handful of whatever dried fruit Botta was munching on, and popped it into his mouth like it was his right. It was weirdly natural. Waka was a captain who could give an order without raising his voice. Someone these guys actually liked. Titus tried to remember the last time he'd seen that. Too many of the team leaders in Zanarkand were either showboats or assholes with something to prove. Waka was neither. It kind of made him wonder which he was. All right, Waka said, clapping once. Listen up, yeah? Time for a little team talk. Dato sat up properly. Keepa paused his lazy kicks. Letty cracked an eye open and sighed like he knew where this was going, but resigned himself to it anyway. Waka leaned back against the wall, arms folded. We're going to Luca, yeah? First tournament in a while. This one's been tough, though. We got something we didn't have before. You mean a guy who can actually score? Botta muttered. Exactly! Waka grinned, either missing or deliberately ignoring the tone. We got Tita's brother, and yeah, we haven't won in 10 years, but that don't matter. That don't mean nothing. No, we've been building, yeah. And I think this year, we got a shot. Keeper scratched at his chin. We don't even know who we're playing yet, Cap. The draw's when we get there. Probably the Killica beasts, Letty grunted. Could be the Luca goers, Jasu said, a little too gloomily. Or the Albed Sykes, Botta added, and the room collectively groaned. Man, don't say that, Dato muttered. They wiped the floor with us last year. They wiped the floor with everyone, Keepa said. Waka clapped once, hard. Hey, come on now. Don't start that. Doesn't matter who we play, yeah? We show up, we give it our best, and we hold the line. I know the stats, but stats ain't spirit. You gotta believe, yeah? The room remained sluggish. 10 years losing doesn't mean we can't win now. We've trained hard, we got hot, and we got crushed 6-0 last year, Jasu cut in. And 5-0 the year before, Botta added. Dato groaned again, flopping backward into his hammock like the weight of history had pinned him there. Man, we're crushed. Waka kept smiling, but Tita saw the effort in it. His voice dipped. We're not cursed. We're just, overdue, yeah? Still nothing. A whole team folded in on itself, deflating one sigh at a time. Titus had enough of this. His captain's instinct flared up and he couldn't help himself as he stood up straight. You guys finished? All heads turned to him. I mean, is this it? Titus asked. You lose a few games, okay, 10 years worth, and now you just assume you're going to keep losing forever? Letty narrowed his eyes. You don't know what it's like, man. Yeah, I don't, Titus shot back. But I do know blitzball. And I know defeatism when I smell it. Keepa looked up. Easy to talk big when you haven't been on the team getting pounded every year. Titus nodded. True, I haven't. I've been on teams that win, though. Teams that fight. Teams that don't roll over and play dead before they even see who they're playing. How you know that? Jasu suddenly cut in, his eyes sharply scrutinizing Titus. His shock of blonde, cropped hair was a stark contrast to his dark skin. I thought you couldn't remember nothing since you were, attacked by sin? Titus was surprised at how quick an answer came to him. Hey, I still remember how to walk, right? And talk? And just as much as I know how to do those, I know how to blitz. It's just in my bones, and if I know me, I wouldn't be on a team I couldn't lead to victory. He almost believed it himself. Yasu simply raised his eyebrows in mild surprise. Look, Titus continued, I get it. The goers are stacked, whoever they are. The Sykes? He looked to Walker questioningly. Walker gave him a lazy nod, one eyebrow arched, a faint grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. You got it. Titus pressed on. Right, the Sykes are fast and dirty, I assume, but you're acting like the match is already over. Keeper crossed his arms, expression heavy. It kinda is. No, Titus snapped. It's not. Not until the final whistle. And if you're playing like you've already lost, then you deserve to. Bullseye. The air shifted. Nothing dramatic, just the subtle ripple of guys who weren't used to being called out so directly. Mutters. Shared glances. Yasu rubbed his chin. Botta looked away, frowning. Titus had hit a chord. You want a chance? Titus said, letting his voice rise as he pressed on. Then start acting like it. You're already in it. I want to see the plays you've been using, the real formations. All of it. Then maybe I can throw in some of mine. Letty blinked at him. You got different strats? Yeah, Titus said. Well, I got some ideas. He nearly let it slip. From Zanarkand. But his jaw clenched it back. No sense throwing a grenade into the middle of a pep talk. And we're going to need to run those out in the water. You brought a blitzball, right? He gestured at the one tucked up beneath Waka's arm. Waka chuckled. Not this one, brother. It ain't exactly what you call, regulation. He gave a knowing wink to Letty, who snorted and elbowed Dato. There was clearly some in-joke Titus wasn't getting, but it didn't matter. He pushed on. It doesn't matter, he said, stepping forward, lifting his voice again to cut across the laughter. Back on Besaid, you guys said what your goal was, and you all said what? The team was quiet, caught off guard, like a class of students mentally scrambling for an answer to the teacher's unexpected pop quiz. Titus repeated it, louder. What's your goal? Dato scratched his head. Titus threw his fist in the air. Victory! He saw the flicker of recognition behind their eyes. So he said it again. Victory! Yasu cracked a smile and nodded approvingly. Victory! Louder! Titus shouted. Come on! Victory! Dato echoed, sitting up. Botta clenched his fists with a nervous grin. Letty leaned in. Victory! Keeper gave a grin, rolled his shoulders. All right, victory! Victory! Waka finally bellowed, slapping the ball with a loud thwap and grinning wide as hell. The word bounced off the walls now. Victory! Victory! Over and over, the Aurochs punched the air, their voices rising together, half chant, half laugh. Dato laughed and shoved Letty in the shoulder. Otta tossed a balled-up towel at Keepa, who ducked and kicked it right back. Yasu started shadowing footwork across the planks like it was already game time. The guys were fired up in a way they have not been in years. Waka caught Titus's eye and gave him a nod, subtle but approving, like he knew what just happened and appreciated the help. For a moment, the room buzzed with that chaotic, good-hearted energy only a blitz team could generate. Part hope, part adrenaline, part sheer refusal to go quietly. And Titus stood there right in the center of it. But not part of it. Not really. He watched them rib each other, familiar hands on shoulders, inside jokes flying thick and fast, snorts and groans and laughter. A team that had lived together, lost together, stuck it out anyway. They had a shared past. That mattered. Even if they didn't win, They belonged to each other. Titus had been a captain, yeah, but never part of something like that. He didn't have years with these guys. No long bus rides or locker room fights or in-jokes or busted plays they still argued about. All he had was his name, and even that didn't mean anything here. His grin weakened. The warmth drained from the edges of the moment just a little bit. Walker was half laughing as Letty mimed throwing him overboard for cursing them with hope, and Datto was pretending to cry into his hammock while Botta made exaggerated prayers to Yevon that they wouldn't draw the Sykes. Titus took a step back. Another. No one noticed. Not out of cruelty, they were just locked in their rhythm again. Old friends clicking back into place. He turned, slipped out the door, boots soft against the wood, leaving the sound of victory behind him. The laughter behind him blurred into something like a wall of sound, all movement and thumping backs and rowdy jokes about Miracle Boy and Captain Titus. He let the wooden door creak shut behind him and stood a moment in the dim corridor outside, the muffled voices fading beneath the low groan of the hull, shifting with the sea. The idea of going back topside hit him almost immediately. The air below deck was warm and stale, thick with old socks and damp cloth. He'd always liked the sea. Zanarkand was surrounded by water and lit by glass towers, the ocean always present at the edges. Getting the wind in his face, tasting the salt, feeling the spray whip by as he headed out to sea for practice, that had been home. He thought of Una for a moment, of course. The idea of bumping into her on the boat and striking up a conversation, like last night at the bonfire, appealed to him. Maybe even a little too much. But it passed. She wouldn't be alone. She never was. Not with that big blue cat always standing like a statue 2 steps behind her. Titus instinctively rubbed his shoulder, remembering how it felt to be driven into the dirt by Kimari's halberd that very morning. Not a memory he was keen to repeat. He had barely closed the door behind him when, lost in his own thoughts, he nearly collided with a mop of orange hair. "Aha!" the man cried, bright-eyed, already reaching for Titus's hand. "Bravo! That was brilliant, that speech just now!" Titus blinked, caught in the stranger's grip. It was the ginger, curly-haired gentleman he spied earlier talking to Datto. Up close, he could see he had a round, flushed face. He was somewhat pudgy, with his t-shirt and shorts looking like they would have fit perfectly 5 kilograms ago, and strapped across his back, almost toppling him backward from the weight, was the enormous backpack. Titus couldn't help but imagine himself curled up inside it while being carried around. It certainly had the space. The man was still pumping his hand. "Inspirational! Absolutely! Got me fired up myself, and I ain't thrown a ball since I was 10. Thanks? Titus managed, trying to pull his fingers free. "Oh, don't be modest. Victory! Just like that. Had me ready to storm the goers' locker room myself." Titus stared. "Who are you?" "Oh, my goodness, lad." The man finally let go and stepped back, puffing himself up like a drum about to be struck. "Name's Walker. Walker the 23rd, merchant extraordinaire." Titus squinted. "Walker the who?" "Don't know me?" Walker looked around, then perked up. "Well, not many do. Not yet, anyway. But soon, word's gonna spread. You mark my words." He hooked his thumbs under the straps of his monstrous backpack, puffing up like a toad ready to burst with pride. "Big tournament in Lucca, eh? Oh, that's a proper business opportunity, if ever I seen one. You got crowds pouring in from all over Spira. Teams, fans, gamblers, hot kid, you name it. Every one of them needing summit. Oceans to soothe the nerves, Phoenix Downs for when the excitement gets a bit much, if you know what I mean. Maybe even a few little charms and baubles. If you say they bring good luck on the field, folks will buy 3 times as much. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story, lad. That's what I always say. Supply and demand, my friend, and a walker's got both in spades. He leaned in, eyes gleaming. Titus was doing his best to take in the verbal onslaught, but Awaka carried on. And if you find yourself short on supplies, or just in the mood for a good deal, you come to me, yeah? I'll sort you right out. Got everything from high potions to hair gel. Guardian's discount, 5% off, straight from the heart. So, stranger, what are you buying? I'm not a... Oh, fine! The merchant made a show of throwing his hands in the air in mock exasperation. Fine, 10% out of me own pocket, mind you. But for Lady Una and her guardians, it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. He furiously shook Titus's hand again. All for the cause, my lad, all for the cause. Titus scratched the back of his head as he pulled his hand back, more forcefully this time to ensure freedom. That's generous. Before Awaka could launch into what sounded like it was going to be a full commercial pitch, a familiar voice cut through from behind. Hey, brother! Titus turned as Waka stepped out from the door behind him, brow raised, grin crooked. You making friends again? Awaka straightened. Ah, Waka! Fine day to you, sir. Always a pleasure. I was just offering your newest teammate a small token of respect. Guardian's discount and all that. Walker rolled his eyes and stepped in beside Titus, nudging him gently toward the stairwell. Maybe later, yeah? We got stuff to do. Of course, Owaka said, nodding rapidly. Just say the word, friends. I'll be around. Titus let himself be steered, glancing over his shoulder, as Owaka adjusted the mountain of a pack, humming to himself like a man deeply satisfied by his own generosity. Friend of yours? Titus asked once they were out of earshot. Waka snorted. Kinda. He's harmless. Talks a lot. You get used to him. Titus grinned faintly. 10%. Waka laughed. He gave you 10, huh? He must really like you. I think I only got 4. They reached the stairwell, the boards groaning lightly beneath their feet. Waka paused at the bottom, once again slapping Titus lightly on the shoulder. Not bad down there, by the way. Team was getting in their heads again. It happens. You lit a fire, though, yeah? Titus shrugged, suddenly a little self-conscious. Just didn't want them going into Luca already beaten, you know? Still, was a good speech. Waka gestured upward. Come on, let's head topside and check in with the others. The stairwell curved gently as it rose toward the deck, every step creaking underfoot. Waka was right behind Titus, his pace loose and heavy, the sound of his boots dragging just a little on each board like he wasn't in any rush. The heat thickened with each step, the sun already high in the sky. Titus hesitated. Something had been nagging at him since they got on the boat and he overheard people flocking to Una. So, he asked, voice casual, is Una's father famous or something? Waka's footsteps stopped for half a beat, then resumed, slower. She's the daughter of High Summit Nebraska, he said, voice tinged with that reverent tone people always saved for someone who wasn't just dead, but sacred. You saw his statue at the temple. Lord Braska defeated sin 10 years ago, brother. Una's the heir to a great legacy. Titus gave a quiet grunt. It's tough when your father's famous. Waka opened his mouth. Titus could see it, the breath drawn in, the way he shifted his shoulders, like a thought was just about to crest. But then... One might say that resenting your father is a luxury not afforded to all, came a cool voice from the shadow cast by the bulkhead. Lulu stepped into view, one arm cradling her strange little stitched doll with the big red nose. The sunlight stabbed around her figure, but never quite touched her skin, like even the sun knew better. Her dress, all heavy layers of black and thick fur trim and violet panels that caught the light like old bruises, looked like it should have cooked her alive in the tropical heat. Yet she didn't sweat. She didn't even squint. The shade clung to her like it belonged there. Titus turned toward her, lips already parting, not entirely sure what he'd been about to ask. What she meant, maybe, or how she knew exactly when to drop a comment like that, but he didn't get the chance. Waka's head jerked to face her, jaw set, something sharp swimming just behind the lines of his friendly face. "Where did you come from, anyway?" His voice wasn't angry exactly, but the words hung off a crooked wire. Something about the way he said it wasn't right. Lulu didn't blink. Her gaze met his, held it like a loaded crossbow, and the silence between them stretched taut for a breath too long. She didn't answer him. She didn't have to. Waka scoffed under his breath and turned, footsteps abruptly louder as he took the rest of the stairs, 2 at a time, the broad slope of his shoulders drawing inward with every step until he vanished below. Titus watched him go, frowning, then turned to Lulu. "What's with him all of a sudden? What's that about?" She didn't look at him right away. When she did, it was slow and deliberate, her gaze landing on his face like a measuring tool. Her irises were that vivid, unnatural carmine, like fresh blood in torchlight. It had neither shine nor kindness. She took a step closer, the floorboards groaning slightly. The fur lining of her bodice brushed the air with the sound of crushed feathers. Her voice, when it came, was quiet enough that the ship's creak swallowed some of the syllables. "I don't know who you are," she said, ignoring his question, "and I don't know where you came from. If you do anything to jeopardize Yuna's pilgrimage." Titus was shocked by the sudden shift in tone. "I won't," he blurted, hands up before he even realized he was doing it. "I'm just trying to get home." His voice cracked a little too high at the end, like his lungs had misfired. He could feel heat crawling up the back of his neck, not just from fear, but from the treacherous pull of his eyes. Don't look down. The neckline of her dress dove deep, artfully reckless, and his gaze hovered just north of disaster. She wasn't tall either, which made his situation all the more precarious. She watched him with something like amusement flickering behind that red glare, like she'd been waiting for him to squirm. And then, just as abruptly, she stepped back, a subtle tilt of her head. Judgment rendered. She made a low, satisfied like he'd unknowingly cleared a hurdle she'd set just for him. The heels of her boots clicked against the decking as she turned away, her long braids swaying behind her in a thick, deliberate rhythm on clinking beads. There was nothing casual in her movements. Everything about Lulu seemed planned to the millimetre, as though she walked to a beat only she could hear. A few steps away, she looked over her shoulder, not stopping. "If you want to talk to Yuna," she said, "now's probably the time. And don't worry, Kimari won't embarrass you again." Titus didn't even reply. He just stood there until she was gone, the echo of her footsteps fading into the crash of waves and seagull cries above. He let out a long breath through his nose, not quite a sigh. Relief, mostly. Maybe a little bit of awe. When he finally lifted his eyes toward the prow, he saw her. Yuna. For a second, he didn't move, just watched. Then, without really deciding to, he started walking in her direction as she stood nearby one of the harpoon guns. She stood with both hands resting lightly on the railing, her back perfectly still, hair tossing softly behind her like it existed in some slower wind. The wide sleeves of her robe flapped gently at her sides. Eyes were on the horizon, fixed like they were following something he couldn't see. He sidled up beside her, already regretting how clumsy this next part was going to sound. "So, what's up with Lulu?" Yuna turned to him slightly, blinking as though pulled from a dream. He rubbed the back of his neck. "She's just been, I don't know, kind of grumpy since we left. Or is she always like that?" Yuna turned her gaze back out to sea. "No," she said quietly. That was all. Titus stood beside her, trying not to shuffle. The breeze pulled at his shorts, played in the hem of his shirt. The waves below were constant, endless, grinding themselves into sound without beginning or end. "You're a blitzball player, aren't you?" Una asked suddenly, voice featherlight. "Yep," he replied without thinking. Silence fell like a dropped coin. They both looked forward again. A beat passed. Then another. And then, for reasons neither of them could explain, they both looked at each other at the exact same moment, caught each other's eyes, and burst out laughing. It wasn't polite or quiet, it wasn't even graceful. It came out in stuttering fits, shoulders bouncing, eyes squinting shut, like some absurd invisible pressure had broken between them and neither of them could stop it now. Titus leaned forward on the rail, grinning like an idiot. Una covered her mouth, snorting once before laughing even harder. The sound of her laugh, light, full, unguarded, it was the most beautiful thing he'd heard in this world so far. The sound didn't lift the air around her, it changed it, softened it, made the whole day feel like it had rolled over to its warmest side. As their laughter slowed, Titus leaned back on the rail, still catching his breath. "Man," he said, chuckling, "we got this whole conversationing thing down, huh?" Una giggled, wiping a tear from her eye. "Oh yeah, we're the best." They stood like that for a moment, grinning, quiet, letting the breeze cool the leftover warmth of their shared laughter. Then Una tilted her head. "Hey," she said, still smiling, "did you really play for the Zanarkand Abes?" His grin faltered a little. "You hear that from Waka? He doesn't believe me at all." "But I believe you," she said at once. Then softer, almost shyly, "I've heard in Zanarkand there's a great stadium, all lit up, even at night. Great blitzball tournaments are held there, and the stands are always full." She gazed out to the horizon wistfully as she trailed off. As she spoke, Titus found himself looking at her again, really looking. As he noticed, somehow hadn't before, her eyes weren't the same. Her left was ocean blue, like the sea below them. Her right, a deep forest green that caught the light differently, like it had its own thoughts. But he blinked, her answer catching him off guard. "How do you know that?" She looked at him then, eyes bright with something tender. "A man named Jecht told me. He was my father's guardian." The name hit him like ice water down the spine. For half a second, he forgot to breathe. Everything in him stilled, his fingers on the rail, his thoughts, even the sound of the sea. Jecht. Here. Guardian? "My father," he said slowly, choosing each syllable carefully. "His name is Jecht." He looked around as if looking for something. "There's no way." "Amazing!" Una clapped her hands together, a laugh bubbling back up like this was something miraculous. "You know, our meeting like this must be the blessing of Yevon," she said as she cupped her hands and bowed quickly in the prayer. Titus didn't laugh. He shook his head. "No, it can't be him." "Why not?" "My old man, he died 10 years ago, off the coast of Zanarkand." Her smile dimmed, her hands lowering. "I'm sorry." He stared out at the water and gave a dissociated scoff like it was an automatic response. "Don't be. He went out to sea for training one day and, well, he never came back. Probably drank too much in the sun. No one's seen him since." He let the sentence drift. "My mom," he started, not sure if he wanted to finish, but he'd come this far. "She was broken. But I was relieved. For her." He wanted to find the right words, but just simply couldn't. They both turned to the waves below at this. Una was quiet for a long moment. Then her expression lit, a realization blooming across her face like light through a cloud break. That must be when Jecht came to Spira. Titus screwed up his face. What? He looked at her sideways, skepticism scrawled plainly across his face. He never even noticed he'd been twiddling at the necklace again. It's true, she insisted, leaning closer. I first met Jecht 10 years and 3 months ago. I remember because that was the day my father left. It fits, doesn't it? It did, but he found himself incredibly reluctant to admit it. He said nothing for a moment, just stared at the horizon like it might blink back. His hands clenched on the railing, not from anger, but from something knotted and old and suddenly awake. Yeah, he said finally, voice lower. It fits. But how would he get here? Una tilted her head, still watching him. She smiled, innocent as a child. You're here, are you not? Titus looked at his feet, thinking that, yeah, he was here, all thanks to Sin. Now that he thought about it, how does a creature like Sin just bring someone from Zanarkand to Spira? And why? Was he really 1,000 years in the future? Part of Titus, an admittedly small part, still wasn't 100% convinced that he wasn't hallucinating, and Una, Waka, and Spira in general wasn't some kind of hallucination or dream. Dismissing that notion, his mind raced with an idea related to alternate dimensions when something twitched out of the corner of his eye. Something on the horizon, over Una's shoulder. A distant ripple at first, almost insignificant. But Titus's eye caught it and didn't let it go. His eyes were too experienced for dangers on the water. Whatever it was too steady, too singular. Not the chaotic rhythm of natural waves, not the lazy pulse of open water under sunlight. It rose once, then again, like a shape breathing beneath the ocean's skin. A bulge. No whitecap, no spray, no foam. It didn't break. Titus's mouth had gone dry before he even realized he'd stopped breathing. He raised a hand, pointing. Hey, I don't like the look of that. Una turned beside him, following the direction of his finger. Her eyes locked on the moving shape, and instantly her face emptied. Her jaw loosened. Shoulders stiffened. A tiny gasp that slipped out of her lips said, No. That one word wasn't even a denial. It was a prayer that had already failed, because they both knew, but didn't dare say out loud for fear of making it any more real than it already was. Heartbeat later, the ship's bell exploded in the air around them. Its sound cracked like glass, shattering the delicate hush that had draped the sea only seconds before. It rang again and again, each toll higher, more urgent. The echoes ricocheted between the masts, across the water, slicing through conversations and laughter still trailing from the lower decks. Then came the voice of a man, small only because of how far up it was, rising from the crow's nest like the ghost of a scream and yet heard by every soul aboard. Sin!